What's up guys, DuArktik here with another Marvel Strike Force video, and in this video we are going to break down the entire Gamma team. We are going to talk about their T4s, their ISO weight, the position of the characters. We are going to debate their stats and their viability in different game modes. This is going to be a very long video because this is a very complex team, and there is no right answer. Depending on which game mode you are using them on, you will have different answers for example the ISO weight. So this is something that we'll need to analyze and that you need to understand why, and then I'm going to give you the best options in my opinion, and then you choose accordingly in order based on the game mode where you are using it. And I would like to ask for a favor, because I think this is going to be a long video. If someone can comment with the timestamps when we are talking about the T4s, the ISO weight and so on. If someone can do that in the comments, I would after pin your comment, and I would really appreciate that favor. So yeah, let's get started. Let's talk about the Gamma team. Red Hulk is coming tomorrow, and the less mistakes you make with this team, the best it will be for you, because you don't want to spend additional resources. And this team is quite expensive, but that's also because they are extremely powerful. You can use this team together, or you can use this team divided in two, and they will be amazing either way. So let's get started. We are going to start first with the T4s, then we are going to talk about their stats and analyze their stats, and then based on stats we are going to talk about the ISO weight, and after that we'll talk about game modes and then have some final thoughts. So let's get started. And as always, we are going to find the infographics for the Gamma team on my Discord. We already have the first impressions version, but there are a few changes here that I already want to change, or it's the format is just way too limiting for how much different options this team has, and this is why I'm going to make such a extensive breakdown of the characters. But as always, as I mentioned before, you can find these on my Discord. Link will be in the description. Okay, so let's get started. Let's talk about the T4s, which is pretty much the easiest part about this team. Okay, so first off we have Hulk, and once again, depending on which ISO weight you are using, you want to change the T4s of Hulk. You don't want to change, but there are some additional ones. So for example, the basic, if you are using Hulk as anything other than striker, the basic is not necessary. Now if you have the full team, and if you have Red Hulk as a skirmisher, you want to do the T4 on Hulk because he's going to be a striker, and when he is a striker and when he does the ISO weight attack, he doesn't lose the charges, so he'll always give additional damage because of that. And I'm gonna be honest, I already tested Hulk as a striker with other characters as skirmishers like Yo-Yo, and the damage is so massive from the striker ISO weight because he doesn't lose the charges. This is something really impressive, and it's something that you should consider. So for the basic, you want to do the T4 in case you have him as a striker, otherwise it's not going to be necessary. Okay, now we have the special. Another special, it's a low cooldown, it's single target damage, it increases the damage by 100% on single target. This is a okay T4, and it really depends on the game mode. Can you stock up on those charges or not? If you can, if you have the skills to play with that, then yes, this is a nice T4. It's not amazing, it's nice to have, and if you are short on T4s, maybe it's the one that you can skip. Okay, now let's take a look at the ultimate. This is one you can definitely skip. It increases the damage on the adjacent targets only, so it's pretty much skippable. You should rather do the special and the basic instead if you want to increase the amount of damage that you do. Now we have the passive, and the passive is the must-have T4 on Hulk, because whenever he drops below 50% health, is gonna get 25% additional turn meter, and whenever a Gamma character or a Wave 1 Avenger character is attacked, every single time he's going to get 5% additional turn meter to a total of 15. Yesterday when I was testing this team and when I was testing Hulk with the Striker Isolate, he was having 3 turns back to back because of this ability and because of other interactions, and like I said, this character is just on another level. If you like the way Black Panther works, Hulk is no different with the right setup for his team. Okay, so those were the T4s for Hulk. Once again, basic if he's a striker, special depends if you can take advantage of that ability or not, and that ability specifically is good if you have big red stars on Hulk, so you can be very close of that 50% mark. The ultimate unnecessary and the passive must have. Okay, so now we are going to talk about She-Hulk. And we don't have much to talk about She-Hulk. The basic increases single target damage, so it's not important. The special, it gives her additional 10% healing. This is not important as well. It might be somewhat relevant depending on the game mode, if you are using her in raids, maybe, but it's still something that I don't find overall important. Then we have the ultimate. It also increases single target damage only, so it's not important at all. And then we have the passive, and on the passive we have some interesting things, because she's going to heal for 5% more on turn, up to 15, and then on maximum charges it's going to increase the amount of damage that she does, and she does a lot of damage, but overall this is not going to be important. You might want to have Striker to give her more damage because of this, or Raider. Both of those abilities are okay, but in my opinion I would give her somewhat of a skirmisher, because she is applying negative effects with this ability, and also because of the ultimate ability that causes a stun. And this is what we are going to break down after, when you are taking a look at the stats of these characters, because once again you want to take advantage of their specific abilities that allow you to win the match. But like I said, we'll break down this more when we'll talk about the stats. Okay, so She-Hulk, the only T4 that she needs is the passive, and that's it. So now let's talk about Brawn. And Brawn is a very interesting character. He doesn't require a lot of T4s like She-Hulk, so on the special ability, this is one of the T4s that you want to do. He's going to copy and clear all positive effects on the enemies, and he's going to spread all the positive effects that he has on himself to all allies. So in a situation where this guy is a fortifier, he's going to spread the minor defense up for everyone. So this is overall a very interesting ability, and once again this is why you have different options with the isolate, and especially depending on the game mode, because fortifier with this ability works in Cosmic Crucible, in Arena, in Dark Dimension, but in Alliance Wars it doesn't work. This is why I need to break down this entire team so you guys can understand exactly all the nuances of this team. So this T4 on the special for Brawn is definitely a must-have. Now, in terms of the ultimate for Brawn is extremely important, and it's not exactly for the amount of healing. The amount of healing, yes, it's extremely important. The immunity is also extremely important, but this health steal is massive. You can cheat the game, you can exploit the game with this ability. For example, when you are attacking magic, you can bypass the health limit that magic has, so whenever she drops by below 50%, Colossus is going to taunt. With this ability you can bypass that. If you have Agatha around 40%, you can lower Agatha below the 20% threshold, and she will not activate her passive ability, which puts her on stealth. This ability is literally a cheat code, and using this ability properly will separate the noobs from the pros. This is definitely an exploit that you can use in different situations to take a huge advantage. Like I said, Colossus will not taunt, and Agatha will not go on stealth because of this ability. It's definitely a winning condition, and that's why this is a must-have T4 for Brawn. Okay, now we have the passive, and the passive is only important in Alliance Wars. So I didn't do this T4, I don't really care about Brawn in Alliance Wars, because he already has 50% additional resistance and with Red Hulk is also going to get more 50% additional resistance. So it's not exactly a must-have, but of course if you want to use them in Alliance Wars defense, this is a must-have T4 for Brawn. Okay, so for Brawn, once again you want to do the special, the ultimate must-haves, and the passive only if you care about Alliance Wars, especially defense. Okay, now we are going to talk about Abomination. And Abomination is a very interesting character. We'll talk about why in a different video for specific interactions that he has with other characters. So with the isolate, with the basic attack, when you do the T4, it only increases the damage on the primary target and secondary target. So it's not that big deal. It's piercing damage, which is nice, but it's not gonna make a big difference. Now, if you have Abomination with Striker isolate, which is a good option, then of course this T4 will have a little bit more value, but it also depends on how big your Abomination is. If your Abomination is too small, it's not going to be relevant enough. Just skip it. If you have Abomination at 4 yellow, 5 yellow, then this is a T4 that you might want to consider. Now we have the special, and the special, it increases the damage on all enemies, it clears defense up, and it also gives additional crit chance if the enemies have defense up or defense down. Now this is important because sometimes it says here 100% crit chance, but if the characters don't have defense up, this ability is not going to work. So keep this in mind, because sometimes this ability does not work, and some people put him as rather isolated, and then he's not gonna crit because the conditions do not match. So when you are doing this T4, what you are really doing the T4 for is to clear the defense up, which nullifies this one. So keep this in mind. When you clear the defense up, you are actually nullifying one of the conditions for the 100% crit chance. But the best part is increasing the multiplier of his attack on all enemies. This ability is somewhat decent with a radar ISO 8 if you match the conditions, otherwise this ability is 100% garbage, so keep that in mind. You need to use this ability properly to take the full advantage. Still, overall, I still think it's a decent T4, because he does piercing damage and also because he has drain, and this means that with this additional damage he's also converting to healing. So this is a T4 that I recommend in any situations. Just make sure that if he has the radar ISO 8, if you made that choice, that you meet the conditions, because otherwise it's not gonna work out. Okay, now we have the ultimate ability, and this is a must-have ability because it guarantees that you are applying a stun to the enemy. Very important. This is a winning condition, so this is a T4 that you must have for Abomination. Finally, we have the passive, and with the passive you get additional healing, you get the draining that I was talking about, and it's not only for himself, it is for entire the team as well. And on top of that, he has this very interesting ability that on turn flips one random positive effect to negative effects on all enemies. This ability is definitely very interesting, and we are going to talk about that in an upcoming video, so make sure you stay tuned for that. Subscribe, press the bell so you don't miss this video, because this is one that you cannot skip. Okay, so those are the T4s for Abomination. So once again, the basic, if he has a Striker ISO 8, the special, it's not super important. The special is better if you have Striker, and it's a little bit complicated to use if you have Raider. The ultimate must have, and the passive also must have for Abomination. Okay, now let's move on to the last character, which is gonna be Red Hulk. And Red Hulk is a very tricky character because he is extremely fast. He starts with 133 speed, and then with charges is going up to 200 speed, so he's going to be crazy fast. On top of that, he's also going to have additional counter attacks, and that's why we are going to use specific T4s based on that. Okay, so with the basic attack, if you do the basic attack, is going to get additional 75% damage. Now, as I just mentioned, he's going to have counters all the time. He's going to have 100% chance of countering, and this is why you should have this character somewhat in the middle. And because of that, because he's going to do so many counters, it's going to be nice for you to have this T4. Even if you don't have him as a striker, if you have him as a skirmisher, for example, he's still going to do counters all the time, so this additional damage is going to be considerable throughout the match. Now we are going to take a look at the special, and the special is it's a must-have T4 because it turn rewinds the enemies, and this affects multiple characters and also multiple times. On top of that, it also has a very low cooldown, so this is a T4 this is an ability that you are going to use quite often, and this means that this T4 will have his value justified because you are going to use this ability multiple times. Because of this condition right here, this is a winning condition, so once again on specific matches, for example against the Darkhold, this is going to allow you to have huge advantage over them because this T4 is going to cancel the passive abilities from Morgan Le Fay for 2 turns, so this is a must-have T4 for all those reasons. Now let's talk about the ultimate, and the ultimate is something that you can skip at the beginning because it's not super relevant. It increases the damage on all enemies, and that's fine, and it always clears the battlefield on the enemy side, so this is only important like within a few weeks or even a few months, because right now we only have the Gamma team with the battlefield effects, so unless you are doing mirror match, and that's always your choice, so unless you are doing mirror match or unless we have more teams with battlefield effects, this T4 is not going to be that important. So in the future, yes, this T4 will be something to consider. Right now is not super important. Finally, we have the passive, and with the passive is going to get 10% additional healing on turn, and as I mentioned before, is going to be extremely fast, so that means he's going to be healing all the time with his 200 speed. And on top of that, whenever he's fully charged, which is with 5 charges, that is going to get 50% additional turn meter. So not only is going to jump his speed from 130 to 200, he's also going to get 50% additional turn meter, so whenever you are charged you'll get a turn right away. And once again, this is another winning condition that you must have to take full advantage of Red Hulk. So with all that said, the special and the passive are must-haves. The basic is something very interesting, and the ultimate is something that right now it's not super important, but it will be more important in the future. Okay, so those are all the T4s for the Gamma team. Now let's take a look at the stats of the team and try to understand exactly why we have such a problem with the ISO 8 of these characters. Okay, so you can see right here the buffs that the team gets, and this is going to be important. So they are going to get 60% more focus in all game modes, also 30% more armor, 30% more health, then 30% drain, then they are going to get another 30% more health, so they are going to be extremely beefy. And then we have specific buffs for war, which is additional resistance. We have 50% resistance coming from Red Hulk, and then we have 50% damage reduction, then we have 200% additional resistance, 30% more damage in Alliance Wars, and specifically for the own characters we'll have more armor for Hulk and more focus for Abomination and also for She-Hulk. So you can see right here that this team has a lot of focus on specific situations. They have a lot of resistance in Alliance Wars, and overall they have very high health. High health is something that we have to keep in mind right now because of the ISO 8 level 5 blue. This is something that might not seem that important, but we are going to get these characters with ISO 8 blue level 5 after we obtain our Apocalypse. So it's something that we need to take into consideration, so we don't waste all this ISO 8 going back and forth between the different types, which unfortunately will be the case sometimes, because as I mentioned, this team has different utilities on different game modes. Okay, so when you are breaking down the abilities, we are taking a look here that, let's take a look on the other side. So with Brawn, he has a lot of healing effects. Some of them are direct healing effects, others are health steal, and that means that some of these effects benefit from the healer isolate, others not so much. Then we have Abomination here. He also has health healing, he also has nukes, he does crits, he applies negative effects, and we need to have all of that into consideration. Stunning is always a winning condition, so you want to make sure that you have enough focus in order to apply those stuns to have those winning conditions. The same goes for She-Hulk. She also has a stun, she also has healing, she also has taunt. These are all things that we have to take into consideration, because you could have healer isolate, you could have fortifier isolate, you could have skirmisher isolate, or you could have striker isolate or raider isolate on She-Hulk, and none of those options would be actually wrong. It all depends on what you want to use with these characters, which isolate opens more winning possibilities for my team. Sometimes he's applying those stuns, other times he's just holding back with that taunt. Okay, so with Hulk, as you can see, Hulk is the one that doesn't have a lot of healing abilities. It only has one, but it's activated, it's with a special, so this is another thing that we have to take into consideration when making our choices. He has a lot of counters, he has a lot of taunts, that means he's going to do a lot of retaliation or counter attacks, and that's going to be important because he's going to benefit more from the skirmisher isolate and the striker isolate. Finally, we have Red Hulk, and Red Hulk does pretty much everything that the other guys do except the stun, but he applies trauma, he applies important negative effects to the enemies, he revives the revive once, and all of these are pretty much winning conditions, so you want to make sure that he applies those negative effects. Okay, so we have the stats here of the characters. Unbuffed, this is the characters individually, and this is important if you want to separate the team. This is something that you should have into consideration, but when you have the team together, the values change, and based on that you want to have the right isolate to make sure that you are able to win. Okay, so let's break down the stats when the characters are all together. So the most important stats that you have to take into consideration, for example, the armor. The enemies have a lot of armor, the enemies have the enemies. These characters have a lot of armor, they have a lot of health, and you can see right here that the damage is very high as well. Some of these characters do piercing damage, other characters do normal damage, for example like She-Hulk, and this is going to be important because you want really to maximize your damage output with certain characters. Then we have the focus, and the focus overall is decent, but it's not amazing. The best character with focus is Abomination, and he already gets a bonus of focus. So right here it says 30,000, but he will get double of that in battle. This is outside of battle. In battle you'll get 60,000 or even higher than that. So skirmisher isolate, because of that it's not going to be super convenient for Abomination on the full team. But other characters that we have right here, we have Red Hulk with 25,000, and overall that's decent, but if we are going to use the Gamma team to defeat other Gamma teams or to defeat the Darkhold team, maybe it's not going to be enough, and this is why we have to take that into consideration when we are deciding the isolate. And that's pretty much it. In terms of resistance, this team doesn't have the best resistance outside of Alliance Wars. This is also other thing that you should have into consideration, and that's pretty much it. Okay, so let's break down the isolates. We have this table over here which shows which isolate is good on different situations. So we have great, good, decent, yikes, and trash. We don't have any character with trash, but you definitely want to avoid the characters with yikes. So Brawn is going to do some damage, he's going to provide some healing, but the best part about Brawn is the spreading of positive effects. And this is very important, as I mentioned before. If you have Fortified Isolate, you can spread that minor defense up for the entire team, and it will be for 2 turns, so this is going to be super important. It also allows him to keep alive, which is great because he doesn't have the best armor, and he also doesn't have the best health compared to the other characters, and he's also a new release character, so you are not going to have him at high yellow stars. So Fortify is going to be great outside of Alliance Wars because he's going to increase his survivability. In Alliance Wars, you might want to consider the Striker ISO weight to make sure that you have the highest damage output in order to defeat your enemies, and most importantly because Brawn has mostly single target damage, and he also applies additional regenerations in Alliance Wars. So Fortified outside of Alliance Wars, inside of Alliance Wars you want to use Striker. Now for Hulk, as you can see, there is no wrong answer, everything is good for Hulk, and as I mentioned before, the Striker ISO weight on him is massive if you have Red Hulk as a skirmisher, and he just goes and goes and goes, and every time he attacks he gets more drain, and he does so much damage. Once again, whenever he does the Striker ISO weight, he doesn't lose the charges, and he still does 50% more damage with his basic attack, so this ability is really massive, and it's one of my favorite options. In terms of the skirmisher, it's also a good option because he has the Striker, he has all those additional counters, and that means whenever he does the counter, he's going to be applying vulnerabilities for everyone, and if the characters already have vulnerabilities, he's going to remove buffs from the enemies all the time. This ability is very strong, but it has some kind of conflict sometimes with Brawn, because if the enemies don't have any buffs, you're not able to copy them. Then we have the Healer ISO weight. This activates with his special. It's a decent option, it's not the best, but sometimes it's convenient. But if you get some kind of negative effects, there is sometimes you get trauma or something like that, this ability will not be the best. And the Fortifier is decent because he cannot give defense up to himself, and the Fortified allows him to survive a little bit longer with additional barrier, and every time he has a turn he's getting more barrier, he has the minor defense up, so this is also another good ability in case you want to make Hulk as tanky as possible. So this would be probably a situation, raids maybe, if your Hulk is not like 5 red stars or 6 red stars or something like that. Overall, it's not super important. In my opinion, the best option when you have the full team is going to be the Striker, but once again it depends. Like on difficulty 4 at level 85, I just don't feel that he needs the Fortifier, but it could be a possibility on Doom 3 difficulty 5. Okay, so in terms of Red Hulk he does massive amount of damage, he applies tons of negative effects, so when we have that into consideration, the Striker ISO weight and the Skirmisher ISO weight is going to be the best options. In my opinion, I think because he's so fast, the Skirmisher ISO weight is going to be the best. You want to guarantee that all the enemies have vulnerabilities, you want to guarantee that all the negative effects are applied, the heal block with trauma is must have, the offense downs is must have, the flipping of the positive effects is must have, and all those positive effects that you are flipping, in the future they will flip into bleeds, so that's going to be a great option. Now, if you want to have instead Hulk as a skirmisher and Red Hulk as a striker, that's also another possibility, but Hulk, he doesn't apply any negative effects, so I think it's more convenient for Red Hulk that applies negative effects to make sure that he lands that trauma, the heal block, the offense downs, and so on and so on. Okay, so now we have She-Hulk, and She-Hulk is a very problematic character. As you can see, all the ISO weights on her are decent. The only difference is that the Striker ISO weight, it does more damage with the passive, but I feel like the passive does not charge us fast enough to be the best option. Then we have the Skirmisher ISO weight, increase the focus. I think this one is going to be important, the focus, because you want to make sure that she lands that stun. Whenever you land that stun, it's like you instant win. For example, if you can apply the stun to Wong, you pretty much win the match on Alliance Wars. So I think it's going to be extremely important to land that stun. The team does not need the vulnerabilities because they are going to have enough with Red Hulk, but the Skirmisher also helps to apply the negative effects that she transfers from our team, the Gamma team, to the enemy team. So I think overall the Skirmisher is one very good option. Now, with the Healer ISO weight and Fortified ISO weight, those options are very good as well in the context of raids. If you want to make her as if you want to make her to have the highest survivability possible, and once again, she doesn't need this on Doom 3.4. Maybe on 3.5, on 3.4 she does not need it. So the Fortified ISO 8, Healer ISO 8, those are additional options that you can have for raids, but overall in terms of PvP are not going to be super relevant. And the Raider, it's like the Striker, it does additional damage, especially with the passive attack. The Striker benefits more the other abilities, the Raider might benefit a little bit more the passive, but overall I think the Raider is the worst option. And finally we have Abomination. Now I prefer Abomination as a striker. He has a lot of focus, he doesn't really need the skirmisher ISO 8 if you have the full team. If you are using him outside of the full team, and yes, there are some occasions where that would be significant, then the skirmisher would be extremely relevant. But on the full team you want to use the striker ISO 8 because overall it does the most amount of damage and the most amount of single target damage. The faster you get rid of some Agatha or Morgan Le Fay or any other character with such importance, the faster you win. In terms of the other options, Fortifier, it also increases survivability because the team overall does not have any way of giving defense up to itself. But once again, Fortifier is going to be a good option, or it's going to be an okay option, a decent option, depending on the game mode, like Dark Dimension or Raids or something like that, like for example Cosmic Crucible Defense. But if that's not going to be the case, in my opinion, the Striker is the best option. Now, why I think the Raider is not the best option? As I mentioned before, whenever he does the clap of the special, if you don't meet exactly the conditions, so the enemies need to have or defense down or defense up, if those conditions are not met, he's not going to crit. If the enemies have a lot of deflect, and this happens with the Darkhold, he is not going to be able to crit. So you need to have this in mind, otherwise you are not going to benefit at all of the Raider. And this is why Raider is such a problem, because the cooldowns are not that fast. It's not like the X Factor, it doesn't get additional turn. It gets a little bit, but it's not enough. So overall, I think the Striker is just going to be the best option. Other problem with the Raider is that the special, which has 100% crit chance, it also has a low multiplier. And whenever you have a Raider, whenever you have crit damage, like Doctor Strange, you also want to have a high multiplier on his abilities, which is not the case for Abomination. That's why overall Striker is going to be the best option. So you can see right here, like this team is very complicated to decide in terms of the ISO 8 because of all these nuances. Are we using the full team? Are we using these characters in Alliance Wars defense? Are we using these characters in Alliance Wars offense? Are we using these characters outside of Alliance Wars? Is it Cosmic Crucible? Is it on Raids or Dark Dimension? Based on all that, we have choices to make, but overall I think I break down the best options. And once again, let's do a recap. So Striker for Brawn in Alliance Wars, Fortifier outside of Alliance Wars. For Hulk, if you have the full team with Red Hulk, Hulk should be a Striker, and it can also be a skirmisher if you want to use Red Hulk as a striker. The reason why we use Red Hulk as a striker is because it increases the amount of damage he does with the healings from the bleeds from the battlefield effect. Once again, the reason why you want to have striker on Red Hulk is because it increases damage of the bleeds from the battlefield effect. But overall, I think Skirmisher is going to be the best option for Red Hulk, because you want those negative effects, you want the bleeds and everything to land, because they can still be resisted. Just because it's a battlefield effect, it doesn't mean that it can be resisted. Then with She-Hulk, I think the Skirmisher is going to be the best option, because you really want those negative effects to be transferred, and you really want her to be able to stun. That stun, once again, is a winning condition. And with Abomination, the Striker ISO 8, I think it's the best option because it's the most consistent experience that you have across the board, and you don't have to be worried about do the characters meet the specific condition in order for me to use this special. And like this, you can always benefit the most out of his draining abilities. Okay, so now that we broke down the T4s, now that we broke down the best ISO 8 depending on the game mode, let's talk about the gear and how far should you gear up these characters. Because they are horseman characters, like, you don't have any option. If you want to get what's his name, Apocalypse. If you want to get Apocalypse, you have to get all these characters at gear tier 17. But until you are ready to gear up these characters to gear tier 17, of course you should prioritize Red Hulk because he's the legendary character. After Red Hulk, the most important characters to gear up are going to be Abomination and Hulk, because they are stats based characters, and Brawn after those two characters because he's a kit based character and you want him just to stay alive. That's the whole point of him. You just want him to stay alive, and that's why you can hold back a little bit on his gear. After that, the last character, the Scarlet Witch of the Gamma team, is going to be She-Hulk. She's extremely expensive to gear up, and the gear helps a little bit, but it's so expensive that it's not relevant enough. The other characters will be so strong that you can keep her at gear tier 15 and you don't have to rush for gear tier 16. Now you can see that based on the mini uniques, we have many characters here that require gamma radiation. So every time you see gamma radiation of the teal gear type, you should always get it, because each of these characters requires 40 of them. So that's going to be 120 until you are able to get Apocalypse. So you really have to farm those because they come very slowly. And every time you see one on the Gold store, on the Alliance War store, or on the Cosmic Crucible store, you want to snatch them. And if you have some kind of special store like we have right now, you should try to snatch them as well from the store. Okay, so in terms of positioning of the team, you want to have the beefier characters in the middle. That's going to be Red Hulk, Hulk, and She-Hulk. I like to have Hulk here next to Brawn because of his counter attacks. It will stop some chain from the middle to this side. And once again, the Brawn is all about keeping him alive. She-Hulk, she can be in the middle, it's not a problem with that. And Abomination, you really don't want him to have any negative effects. You always want to have Abomination ready to apply that offense down, defense down, and stun from his special ability and ultimate abilities. So overall, I think this is going to be the position. You want to have Red Hulk somewhere in the middle, so he gets as many charges as possible, as fast as possible. So he charges up, he does his ultimate, he does the battlefield effect, and he also gets the 200 speed. Okay, so in terms of the game modes we have right here, these characters are going to destroy Blitz. You can use Brawn, Hulk and She-Hulk on one team, then you can use Red Hulk by himself on another team, and then you can use Abomination on another team as well. That's how powerful these characters are, that you can break one team in 3 in order to win on Blitz. Now, in terms of arena, Red Hulk is going to dominate arena together with Morgan Le Fay and Rogue because they are all horseman characters and they are going to work together on that team. In terms of the other characters from the Gamma team, they might work decently well in arena. We just don't have any data for now, and it's inconclusive based on their stats and on their abilities. Now, that's going to be the same for raids. From my experience, they are pretty decent at low levels for Doom 3 raids at difficulty 4. This is the maximum difficulty available right now, and they are pretty decent. So I expect their evaluation to go up by quite a lot whenever we are able to gear tier 16 all these characters and level them up to level 90. Now, in terms of Dark Dimension, these characters are extremely powerful because we have 3 characters that work together. We have Brawn, Hulk and Abomination. These 3 characters by themselves in Dark Dimension, they are very strong. And as I mentioned, they work together, they give turn meter to each other, they heal up to each other, and yeah, these characters together, very good for Dark Dimension. Now, in terms of She-Hulk, she is by herself on the city lane, so because of that, she's not going to be important for Dark Dimension at all. This is why you can hold back on her until you are ready to unlock Apocalypse. It's not important to gear her up. And for Red Hulk, is going to dominate Dark Dimension because of Morgan Le Fay and Rogue. Morgan Le Fay by her own, she destroys Dark Dimension, but together now with Red Hulk, it's gonna be to the next level. Then we have Alliance Wars. This is the symbol of Alliance Wars. They are completely going to destroy Alliance Wars, and that's pretty much it. We don't have to say anything about it. Then here, this is Cosmic Crucible, and it has the same symbol from Blitz, but it's yellow because it's like the opposite color, and they are on the same place in game. That's why I put the same symbol. But this is for Avengers Tower, because we can choose when to use this team, because we can choose exactly which are going to be our enemies when we are going to use the Gamma team. Then they have max score across, because they are going to destroy whichever characters you put them against. Or you can separate them in 2 different teams, and they will also be very good in Avengers Tower. Finally, we have Cosmic Crucible. Once again, these characters are extremely overpowered, so I think that they are going to destroy Cosmic Crucible, whether you put them on defense or offense, whether you put them on the Legendary room, the Bio room, or whichever other room it is. The Gamma team is going to destroy these characters, because this team is on another level compared to any other team that we have right now in the game. Even when we compare them to the Darkhold, this team is already one step above compared to that one. Okay guys, so that's gonna be the video. I hope you guys enjoyed. The video was a little bit longer than I was expecting. I mean, I was expecting a longer video, but not this long, so I apologize for that. But we had to break down all this information to make sure that you understand exactly what you have to do in different game modes. And Red Hulk is coming tomorrow, so make sure that you make the best investments on these characters, so this team wins for you. This team is very, very powerful, and if you use them correctly, you are going to pretty much destroy every other team on multiple game modes. We'll be having videos about these different game modes using this team in the near future. We are going to use them in raids, in Dark Dimension. We are going to use them everywhere to test them out, and then you can see for yourself how powerful this team is. So once again, make sure you stay tuned for that. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Make sure you turn on notifications. If you are not still part of the Discord, make sure you join in. And that's gonna be all for now. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, make sure you smash that like button, and if you found the information helpful, make sure you share it with your friends on Facebook and Discord. If you're new to my channel, make sure you subscribe for more Marvel Strike Force content, and I will catch you guys later.